scary true late night forest story. This story took place a few months ago with two of my friends. It was about 4 in the morning, and me and my friends were in this small abandoned cabin in the woods in front of my house. We were smoking in there like we always did. We were listening to music, having a good time, when one of my friends turned down the music and said, "I'm not trying to sound paranoid or anything, but I just heard someone yell and I saw the flash of a flashlight." At first, I thought he was just high and paranoid, but I still took what he said seriously. So we turned the music off and sat there for a few seconds. That's when we started hearing some rustling of some leaves. At first, I thought it was just the rain falling off the leaves of the trees since it had just rained, but then it started to get louder. The sound got louder and louder until it turned into distinct footsteps. We all completely froze. It was 4 in the morning and no one should have been in the forest. The footsteps got louder and louder until we heard them just outside of the cabin. We heard the footsteps continue to walk around for a few minutes. We didn't move a muscle and didn't make a single sound until we heard the footsteps begin to walk off and fade into the distance. After a few minutes of being in shock and continuing to stay still, we decided that the coast was clear, so we packed up all our stuff. We got up and grabbed some sticks to use as weapons, just in case. We got out of the woods as fast as we could and went to go into my house. Once we got onto my property, we noticed that on my front lawn there was a huge branch that had fallen right where we had walked by earlier. It wasn't there when we came out 45 minutes earlier. Once we saw that, we all got a bad feeling in our guts. Immediately after that, I started to hear more footsteps coming from the back of my house. We all immediately took off down my street and didn't look back. Once we got to the end of my street, we stopped to catch our breath. That's when, from down my street, we heard a horrific screaming sound. I can't even describe the sound we heard. It sounded like a crazy person screaming at the top of their lungs, but it also sounded non-human-like. We were all absolutely terrified. We continued to run until we were far enough that we knew we were safe. After a while of just waiting around, we decided that it was safe to go back to my house. We were able to make it inside safely without seeing or hearing anything else. When we woke up the next day, we went back outside. We went to the tree where the branch had fallen. What we saw still gives me shivers to this day. On the tree, there were knife markings all over it. To this day, I still don't know who it was or what they would have done if they caught us, but honestly, I really don't want to know. My girlfriend and I had an odd experience in the forest, and we still can't shake the feeling. This story takes place not even 24 hours ago, when my girlfriend and I decided to take a short walk in her town's forest preserve, as we finally started getting warmer weather. The trail starts off on a barren, hilly field that oversees only a handful of horses a few yards away. The sun was beginning to set. The sky was painted in pastel pinks and blues that was slowly fading into a dark, deep blue, beautiful to see walking in the plains, but as soon as we walked into the forest, the comfort and safety of the childlike colours were covered by a canopy of trees that barely started growing leaves. The trail immediately went from an open field into the forest. The trees were sharp, standing straight up, no imperfections in the trunks, no overgrown roots reaching to grab us from the ground, no branches threatening to smack us in the face. As we continued on the trail, just walking and talking as girls do best, all of a sudden, both of our eyes darted to the ground as my girlfriend stopped in her tracks, letting out a small noise of disgust and confusion. As we examined the mysterious lump on the ground, we realised how eerie it truly was. Lying in front of our feet was a dead squirrel, which wouldn't seem as abnormal, but the squirrel didn't look just dead. It looked like the life was sucked out of it. The squirrel was in a shriveled up position, sharp, fang-like teeth still in its mouth, as well as its sunken-in eyes. The squirrel was entirely black, every inch of it. Not a hint of variation or discoloration. No lighter tones tucked into the folds of its limbs. Its body showed no signs of decay, just a uniform, unnatural blackness. The body had no bugs flying around, despite me constantly getting bit by them throughout the walk. It had no odour, no smell of death lingered near it. We couldn't understand how an animal could lose its life so entirely without another creature coming to claim it as food. In the middle of the woods, in spring, it felt unnatural, no predator stepping in to carry on the cycle of life. My girlfriend said from the top of her head to the bottom of her toes, she felt a hot vibration flow through every nerve ending in her body. At the same time, I felt a deep pressure that caused every joint in my body to tense up, as well as my chest getting so tight I started to believe someone punched me the day before. Without hesitation, we decided to turn around, as we are very into trusting our intuition. As we made our journey back to the car, barely a mile out into the trail, my girlfriend turns to me and asks me if I heard that. I shut my trap and listened, only hearing the leftover echoes of what she heard. She said she could barely make it out, but it sounded like a woman screaming, "Help me." We waited a beat before continuing our walk, trying to beat the now quickly setting sun. We walked in silence, focused on getting the hell out of there, both of our bad feeling increasing with every step we take. I began to hear the screams myself, but they were sounding further and further away, which I found odd, because from where my girlfriend initially heard the screams to where we were now, the individual screaming would have had to quickly jump in a car and drive another mile or so away from us. That's how quickly these screams got further and further away. As I thought about it, I had a realisation that made my stomach drop. I told my girlfriend that we just needed to get out, and we needed to get out now as the screams continued to get further. There's a man in the woods. The title is self-explanatory. I don't know if he lives out there somewhere or if he's actively moving around, but I've seen a masked man wandering around in the woods on multiple occasions. I've lived in and around the woods myself since I was very young, so I've always loved taking walks, going on hikes and camping. The nighttime never used to bother me, and I'd even enjoy midnight walks or spontaneous trail travelling whenever I couldn't sleep. That was until the first time I saw him. It was the summer of 2024, and I was out on what should have been nothing but a routine walk at night. The daytime was hot and horrible, so I had no desire to go out during the day, but the evening cooled everything down enough for me to get the motivation to actually go out for a bit. The area I live in has a route, and I had a route that I used to take quite frequently that went around in a bit of a loop, which made it easier to actually get out, since it would only take about 45 minutes to complete. From where I live, it takes about 15 minutes of walking before you come across a small clearing which leads to a decent set of hiking trails, ones I've been up and down on multiple occasions. I headed out of my house around 9 p.m, headphones in, Red Bull holstered in my pocket alongside a pocket knife. I always tried to carry around with me. Nothing seemed unusual or off-putting in any way as I made my way down the road, really getting into the zone and enjoying the nighttime woodsy vibe while listening to some shitty indie band I used to be into back then. At the 15-minute mark, I started to come up on that clearing, and for whatever reason, my earbuds had randomly disconnected. I had them for a while at that point, so something like that wasn't very unusual. As soon as I took them out though, trying to reconnect them, I heard something off in the distance. I tried to focus on what it was. I slowed down once I realised it was rustling of some kind, and I stopped dead in my tracks when I realised it was the sound of something walking. Whatever it was sounded heavy, so I assumed it must have been a black bear or something, since those are fairly common where I live. No big deal, I thought. A little nerve-wracking, sure, but it wasn't anything I wasn't already used to. As the brush thudding got closer though, I began to grow a little more unsure. The rhythm sounded off somehow, and at some point I realised it sounded more like a man than a bear. I half expected to spot like Bigfoot or something. It happened to be a full moon, so I figured I'd wait a little longer to get a good look at what or whoever was coming out from the clearing. I stood by the immediate tree line a little way away, so I felt safe enough to catch a look if possible. What I saw made me wish it really was Bigfoot, or even a werewolf. The silhouette of a man made itself apparent, trudging out of the trails and into the moonlit clearing. Initially, I thought it could have been some other random person who happened to enjoy night walking as well, only that thought was immediately shattered when I caught a glimpse of his face. At first, I thought the guy might have just been impossibly pale, only amplified by the moonlight, but soon enough I realised he was actually wearing a mask. It was human with incredibly sharp features, pure white but dirty and dingy. He was wearing a flannel of some kind alongside some boots and jeans, and he walked with a slight hunch that went back and forth between straight postured and almost crouched down. I watched him walk into the middle of the clearing with my heart in my throat, and it only felt worse when he actually stopped moving. He turned his head back and forth like he was looking around, then turned his head up towards the sky and just seemed to stare. It was almost like he was stargazing. Meanwhile, I'm trying to not piss my pants whilst I watch some Jason Voorhees knockoff contemplate the meaning of life. After a few minutes, he began walking again, leaving the clearing completely and walking down the middle of the road. I waited until he was completely out of sight before I immediately made my way back the way I came. I was too scared to run because I thought he might hear me or something, so I just speed walked the entire way back. I locked every door and window I had, cranked the AC and barely slept the rest of the night until the sun finally came up. That was only the first encounter I've had with him. It fucked me up in a big way for a long time, but weirdly enough, that one time alone was the most outright terrifying. Every other time I've seen him has been this weird mixture of both immensely confusing and somehow really sad. Still incredibly disturbing though. The next time I saw him was during the fall of the same year. I want to say like October. I made it a point to avoid going out on any more night walks after the first time, and even took a hiatus from going out in the woods whatsoever for a few months. I've always loved autumn, so one day I finally went back out for a walk, then a hike, and so on and so forth until practically nothing had changed, except for the fact I didn't stay out past dark anymore. Eventually I ended up going back to the trail a couple more times, once I chalked up that encounter to a one-time occurrence. But obviously I tried not to stay out too late, or go in as deep as I would have before. Keyword tried. One time I was not as careful as I should have been. I was already riding the shot of adrenaline I got from being in there in the first place, but that adrenaline was quickly losing its charm as the sun began to set, especially once I realised I'd somehow gotten turned around. What started off as a relaxing enough walk on a cool autumn day was quickly turned into something much more akin to the intro of some indie horror game. I was on a trail I didn't even recognise the name to, deeper than I should have been. My steps hurried and uneven as I tried to make my way out. I guess it was already too late because a little way down the trail I saw what looked to be someone kneeling down in the middle of the path. They were faced away from me, and at first I thought they were kneeling down because of a sprained ankle, messed up knee or whatever. When I got a little closer out, I called out to ask if they were okay, but found no response back. I got a little closer again and then asked again if they were hurt. Once again I got no response, and if anything the forest itself seemed to grow a little quieter. Desperate for some kind of way out of here, I asked if they knew where we were or how to get back to the main trail. No response. They remained knelt down on their knees, arms to the side, almost like they were in some kind of trance. At this point, I was maybe about 50 feet away from where this person, very obviously a man, was kneeling. I felt my heart begin to sink as I tried to close some more distance, just from desperation and concern. The ground beneath my feet was incredibly soft and seemed to muffle each step I took until I closed 20 feet between us. I guess I stepped on some secret twig or something because the single loud snap that erupted from the ground was what finally got a response. Before I could even react properly, the man stood up completely and turned to face me. It was him. It was the same guy from summer, only this time I wasn't hidden by a convenient shadow tree line. I was face to face to some random psycho, frozen in place from shade dread and fear. I couldn't move whatsoever. I felt like a deer in headlights, and confusion joined alongside my utter horror once I realised he looked the same way I did. He stood with a weird stance, his boots planted into the ground, shoulder length apart and his arms to the side. He was completely still, with the only exception being his hand, which seemed to subtly shake or even quiver. From this distance, I got a much better look at him. He was big, not necessarily tall, maybe somewhere between 5'8" and 5'10", but he was stocky and broadly built like the trunk of a tree. He had messy, possibly curly blonde hair that framed the same exact mask from last time, adorned with various cuts to its hard plastic alongside dirt, grime and whatever else it was. Most startling was the fact the mask didn't even hide his eyes, which were this deep shade of blue that seemed to look not at me, but through me. His clothes were similar to the last time I saw him, but the flannel looked like it might have been a different colour. This time it was a dark plaided green, his jeans still dark blue and his boots still mud-toned brown. They were dirty, but looked as if they had only recently been covered in dirt. I stood there in complete shock, the tension worsening as he slowly cocked his head to the side. The gesture was reminiscent of the way an animal might study you, curious yet immensely cautious. I watched his eyes dart around me, up and down, possibly sizing me up. His head went back to normal, but something changed. The stillness between us didn't seem to last as his hand began to shake and twitch, his body visibly tensing up while his eyes widened. I was terrified, so much so I could cry, but more than anything else I was just confused, and for a moment it looked like he might have been just as confused as I was. In a single second, something shifted or changed. I don't know what it was exactly, but once we locked our eyes, for a single second, he looked like he was even more terrified than I was. I watched his gaze harden as he began to make some weird, low rumbling sound, adjacent to some kind of growl or something, and it sounded a lot closer to an actual animal than I would have ever been comfortable with. He tensed up even more, and I prepared for the worst. Only the worst never came. He turned and full-on sprinted off in the opposite direction, down the trail, and I waited until the heavy thudding faded in the distance before turning tail and running myself, basically crying the entire time. Thankfully, I found my way back to the main trail and eventually back to the main road. Once again, when I got home, I locked every door and window shut and was barely able to get any sleep. The only difference this time was that my lack of sleep wasn't purely motivated by fear. Fear was most definitely involved, but so was utter confusion and a growing curiosity about whatever this was. For the next couple of months, I couldn't stop thinking about it. It was horrifying in a way that felt so primal and real, yet at the same time felt so different than how that sort of encounter should have gone. It seemed too ridiculous and cliché, and yet every time I thought about him, something inside of me wanted to know more. I saw him again in March of 2025 via a drone I had recently bought off of Amazon. Instead of going out in the middle of the night myself, I hunkered down in the garage and decided to fly the thing around to see if I could spot anything interesting, or at least some pretty nighttime scenery. Midnight winter vibes and all of that. I even had some hot cocoa for the occasion. I paid decent money for what seemed like a ridiculous flying range, so I went a little ways down the road. As I'm nearing the end of it, who else do I see except the same masked man from last time? This time, he's literally lying down in the middle of the road in the dead of winter. Surprisingly, he's dressed somewhat appropriately for the weather, wearing an open plaid coat with some kind of hoodie underneath it. He even had the hood up, obscuring everything above the shoulders aside from the same mask he's been wearing this whole time. He's just laying there. I fly a little closer just to get a better look, honestly checking whether or not he was dead or something, but my suspicion is immediately crushed once he notices the drone. He sits up from the snow-covered road and stands up fully, turning to face me whilst I'm still up in the air. Once again, he cocks his head to the side, just staring up at the camera as I draw in closer. I was feeling a little more confident considering I was within the safety of my own home, so I fly closer and closer, even as he begins to move out from the road and briefly into the brush. At this point, I'm about 25 to 30 feet from the ground, and suddenly he pops back out of the woods holding a stick of some kind. He reels his arm back, and before I realise what exactly he's doing, he throws it up at the drone, hits it, and makes it come crashing down on the road. A few seconds later, it shakes a whole bunch before going completely black as the feed cuts out. I didn't dare try to retrieve it until the next morning, this time actually driving down to where he knocked the drone out of the sky. I parked on the side of the road, hopped out, and it didn't take me too long to find the wreckage of the drone I only got to fly once. It was broken beyond repair, so I guess whoever this is really does not like being seen. Nearby was the imprint he'd left in the middle of the road lying down, though at this point it was faded, probably because of the occasional car driving down over it. The one thing that stood out to me was the handprint left by the drone wreckage, more than likely his own. It was pressed down in a way that looked intentional, like he was trying to send some kind of message. For reasons I still don't know how to put into words, I pressed my own hand against where his had been. Immediately, I was flooded with such a weird sense of isolation. The entire world seemed to stop for a second as I felt where he had been, where he had purposefully placed his mark, possibly trying to show someone he was in fact here. I felt sad. I don't know why, but the fact he had left something so deliberate didn't feel very malicious at all. It was a handprint, no message, no scribbling, no doodling, just a single spot where this masked man had intentionally pressed his hand into the snow long enough for the intent to keep until this moment. It very well could have been some warning, considering it was right by the corpse of half my paycheck. It could have been a lot of things. I didn't see him again for the rest of that year. There were a few times I thought I might have caught a glimpse of him, but it always ended up just being another normal person taking a walk down the road. There were even times I went out at night thinking I heard the same distinct rustling or thudding, but the only sign I ever had that he was still around was a torn piece of plaid hanging off a branch. The feeling of unease never left me, but it was less about my personal safety and more about simply not knowing what the fuck was up with this guy. I only recently saw him again in July on the 27th, which is actually what led me to write all of this down in the first place. Considering how long it had been since I'd seen him or anything else even remotely strange, I felt secure enough to return to my night walks. I didn't do it very often, and I still don't, but at this point I've stopped being outright terrified of him, and more so just immensely cautious. I was making my loop around as per usual, with the major difference being that I never wear my earbuds at night anymore. I was about to complete the loop, maybe only a few houses away from my own, when I realised up ahead I was actually catching up to somebody, and since it happened to be full moon that night, I could see an unsettling similar silhouette walking about 100 feet or so ahead of me. I almost stopped walking entirely, but I thought the sudden stop may draw his attention, so I fell into the curse of curiosity and caution as I kept my own pace behind him. He had such a weird slow stride, it seemed so uneven yet self-assured. Occasionally he'd hunch his back slightly before straightening it, walking with an occasional limp of either leg. The longer I followed him, the more he looked almost dazed and confused, adamantly on high alert but also in some sort of trance. Out of nowhere, he stopped moving entirely and just stood there in the middle of the road, making me quickly duck off to the side and crouch. Ironically, it felt like I was the one stalking him, which, considering our respective appearances, felt like it should have been the other way around. Maybe it already has been before and I've just had no idea. He stood there for a solid minute before he started to shake. Out of nowhere, I heard him start coughing, which led to an absolute fit of it. Each cough sounded more strained and painful than the last as he fell to his hands and knees. I was wondering if maybe I should try to help him or something, but what if he just ran away again? Worse, what if he really did attack me this time? I could swear he was about to puke, but the coughing fit ended as quickly as it began. He remained on the ground for a second before he stood back up, loudly cracking his neck to the side before he began to look around. I crouched down further, hoping to God he didn't see me as he turned his body completely. Once again, he was in some sort of flannel, this one looking a little more blue, wearing the same mask of course. He turned back and for whatever reason took a turn to the right, going down some new back road. I thought about just going home, but this was already maybe 3 houses from where I live. I just didn't feel safe going back inside with him so close, and at the same time there was a part of me that wanted to find out just what the fuck he was doing out here all this time, if anything at all. I felt so stupid, but for whatever reason, I turned down the same road as my curiosity overrode any rational thought I had at the time. If curiosity was killing any cat that night, it was probably going to be me. The road turned out to actually be an unfinished driveway which led into some sort of construction site, which I had somehow missed despite it being so apparently new. Up ahead, there looked to the foundation of a house that was being built, so like any good horror story protagonist, I proceeded up that way. I made it to the foundation easy enough, despite the terrain being a work in progress, looking around for anything of note if not the masked man himself. I didn't find anything, but the foundation did have a single concrete wall put up. I went up to it and slowly peeked my head around it, and to this day I'm so thankful that I didn't just rush out. There was a hill a little ways away with a decent amount of trees cut down from the construction, and I want you, dear reader, to take your best guess at who just so happened to be up there. The moon perfectly lit up where he was, giving me a clear shot to examine him even further. He was sat down up against the tree, his head looking around for a second, before he just tilted his head back and looked towards the sky the same way he did the first time I ever saw him. I was obviously incredibly nervous with sweat running down my face and everything, but I wasn't necessarily scared. If anything, I was becoming more and more absorbed in watching him, studying him, and have since found myself almost enamoured by his mere existence. Despite looking like such a cliché Jason Voorhees knockoff or something, I had the feeling he was really just lost. In a way, he looked almost lonely, and that was only further intensified by the way his hand reached up towards the sky, towards the moon, almost like he was genuinely trying to grab at something before it fell back down to his side. I watched him for another 10 or 15 minutes, before ultimately deciding just to go back home. He didn't move or do anything that entire time. It was almost like he just fell asleep or something. I guess I just didn't want to disturb him, let alone be so close by if he woke up or had another coughing fit. Slowly, I moved away from the wall and made it a point to be as quiet as possible, walking back up the driveway and into the road. Once there, I made my way back home and did the same thing I always do whenever I see him around. Only this time, I stayed by the window in case I could see him walking by or something. I saw somebody walking by about an hour later, but I don't think it was him. Not that I could tell anyways. As of today's day, I haven't seen him again since last month, and as weird as it is, I can't help but almost look forward to the next time I do, even though it does scare me a little bit. I realise this entire thing sounds incredibly far-fetched, so I'll use this last segment to clear up some possible questions I know people would rightfully have. Why didn't you ever call the cops? Truthfully, I just didn't think to do it the first time. It was horrifying, but I live in a fairly small rural town. By the time I actually thought to do it, it was already the next day, and I figured if someone else saw him, they would have already done it themselves. We do have our fair share of weirdos up here too, so if I'm completely honest, running into some masked maniacs still isn't what I'd consider a worst case scenario. I got pretty close to calling the second time, but only hesitated because of the fact he looked just as scared as I was. By the time I got home, I was already too overwhelmed with fear and confusion to think about it. Even with all that being said, I know I haven't done a whole lot to justify not calling anyone about this. That's because I don't actually have a good justification for it. Truthfully, I just can't bring myself to make some sort of report on it. I don't have any good reason for this, but I figure it must have already been done by now, since I doubt I'm the only person who's ever seen him, and when I say he has a unique outline, I mean that in the most literal way possible. I've left out certain physical traits that would otherwise immediately give away this man in particular, mostly just in case somebody else sees him and mentions said traits, so I know it's genuine. Have you talked to anyone about this? Not at length, no. I don't know a lot of people in town well enough to bring it up. The most I've done is occasionally ask if someone's seen anything weird going on in the woods. Usually I get nothing in return except maybe a ghost story or a stupid sighting, but other than that, nothing. People also ask, are you sure nobody else has seen this? Not in the slightest. I've even made it a point to go on Google and search up any kind of article or post talking about masked men in the woods, but nothing has come up aside from a singular post from like 5 years ago on some discussion site from a town about an hour's drive away from where I live. It was from an older woman who described seeing a masked individual roaming around the local cemetery in the late evening a few days before Halloween, but she didn't describe anything about it. She literally just said spooky and left it at that. I'd link the site if it didn't so conveniently vanish from existence. Why is this the first time you're ever talking about it? Honestly, I don't really know. Like I said, I don't know a lot of people in my town to talk about it with, and I can't say I've ever kept up with many other people who've been in my life, even my parents. I only recently decided to talk about this whole thing after obsessing over how outright bizarre it all is. I hardly ever use Reddit anyways, and I decided to post about it in the horror-themed subreddits because, let's face it, this is horrifying at face value. Worst case scenario is that nobody believes any of this and gets a somewhat interesting story out of it. Maybe somebody else will see this and know what I'm talking about. Maybe somebody else has even seen the same guy. Who knows? This whole ordeal started off as something genuinely terrifying and has since turned into something much more fascinating and even somber. Logically, I know I should still be so much more scared of this than I actually am, but something about this masked man seems almost innocent and depressing. Whenever I see him, he just looks so lost and alone, more like a wild animal trying to find some sort of shelter than anything else. He walks around like he has no idea where or even who he is, like he's lost in some kind of trance, or possibly even some sort of psychosis. I have no idea who he is or what he's been doing out there. Part of me thinks maybe he's just some weird guy playing out a fantasy, but it feels so much deeper than that. I don't know for sure that he lives in the woods, but he has to live somewhere in the area for me to run into him more than once. I can't help but wonder if this masked man is really someone going through some sort of mental health crisis. Maybe. I don't know. I can't help but want to figure out what else is going on here, who this guy even is, and if he even knows this is happening.